Thanks for joining this week's Go Erie Live discussion. Today, Erie Times News reporters Kevin Flowers and Matt Rink will be talking about the May 21st Erie County Municipal primary. Thanks to Gannon University for sponsoring these live discussions every week. Enjoy the conversation.
Okay, Matt, here we go. Let's talk a little bit about the primary coming up next week. Let's give a little bit of an overview on the races and what people should be looking for and expecting.
Well, there are several candidates. This is probably one of the most packed ballots you get in an election cycle. City council seats, county council seats, judicial races, township supervisors, borough councils. It really runs the gamut. So there really isn't going to be anyone throughout the county who has a bare blank ballot on Tuesday. But the key races really are the race for Erie County Court of Common Pleas, Erie County Council, and Erie City Council. So if you want to take it from there.
Let's talk a little bit about the judges race. That's going to get a lot of attention. We have Aaron Connolly, prosecutor. We have Ed Smith, who ran last time around for a judge and finished fairly well in the general election there. We have Dave Ridge, obviously. Everybody knows him, and he's seen as one of the leading contenders for this. We have former Mayor Joe Sinnott, and we have lawyer Pete Sala. So that's going to be, it's kind of hard to forecast where that's going to go. We've had the Bar Association weigh in on their rankings on those candidates. At least for me as a voter, it's kind of tough for me to predict what's going to happen there. I don't know what you think.
I had just gotten off the phone with Jim Wirtz, the Democratic Party chairman, and he said, even in regard to Ed Smith, he's the one registered Republican. Now, all 5 candidates are cross-filed, but even with Ed Smith, he said that, really the voters can't go wrong in that race. But it is very important. There are 2 seats open, 5 candidates running, and those seats are open because of the retirement of Judge John Gerhardt, and then the March 2017 death of Robert Sandbrook. So we'll see how this plays out. It's really kind of hard to tell. You've got names on the ballot like Sinnott and Ridge, and then you've got other folks that have been around, Smith, Connolly, and Sala for a while. So,
on a judge's race too, they don't really answer questions on the issues.
Right.
So you're going a lot of times on what you know about their experience, what you know about their trial record, how they've actually performed in the courtroom, things like that. So it's a little bit of a different animal than other political races where you're asking people to take positions on various issues.
Right, and that's because they obviously can't take positions on those issues. So, yeah, it is a kind of a different animal. I think you're right in saying that. So, and I know that talking to Doug Smith earlier this year, he said that he expected there to be a lot of money put into those races in terms of trying to get out the vote and build support. So. But the other race then, I think really the other 2 races that we talked about, City Council and County Council, there's a lot at stake with those 2 races because they're both 7-member bodies, and there is the potential of having a new majority, if you will, or a majority of new members, probably would be the better way to put it. Depending on how those races shape up. I know you obviously cover City Council, and we've got Mel Witherspoon running is the only incumbent running for re-election. There are 3 seats open there.
Right. And what happened with that was Sonny Arrington decided not to run for re-election. The other seat that's on the ballot this time around was held by Bob Mursky, who was elected to the State House. And council filled his seat temporarily with former Councilman Curtis Jones, who came back. Curtis told us pretty much immediately, that this was a short-time thing for him, that he wasn't going to appear on the ballot for 2019. So you have at least a guarantee of really at least 2 new faces. And the interesting part too, and I know you and I plan on talking about this, is one of the seats that's not on the ballot is held by Kaz Kwiatkowski, who is really the only candidate for city treasurer.
Right.
So you would think that he will win that city treasurer's race in November, and then he will have to step down from council. He's told me that that would be his plan if he was elected treasurer. And then we could right away have city council going through a process to fill another seat for the remainder of that term.
And when Mirsky's seat was open, there were 52 people
Correct.
who applied. Do you think that many people would come out, or do you think that council would give some discretion?
I'm not sure. I was actually surprised that there weren't more, especially Democratic candidates on the ballot for city council this time around. I thought there would be a lot more than there are. But I think if they did have a process where they need to fill a seat, which looks fairly likely, you're probably going to get a big number of people again.
Right. And really kind of a similar situation on county council. You have two incumbents who are not seeking re-election. That's Carol Law.
Right. She's
ending a 24-year career as the council person for District 7.
Which is West County.
And then you have Kathy Fatika, who also is not seeking re-election. Now, Kathy, of course, took office under unfortunate circumstances. Her husband, Phil Fatika, who many people know, he passed away right before he started his third term, and Kathy was appointed. She was on the ballot 2 years ago because, by the rules, she had to. She served the first 2 years and then had to run for the unexpired portion of that seat. Won re-election, but decided this time out that she wasn't going to. So those are two incumbents right there that aren't going to be on the ballot. And then the wild card really is Kyle Faust, because in District 5, which is your Harbor Creek Northeast area, he's been in office
as well.
Right, and he's been. I think he's seeking his fourth term. Fourth or fifth term, but he's also on the ballot running for county controller, and has told us that should he win in November that seat, that he would stay in as county controller and resign his seat as on county council.
So we could have county council going through, soon after an election, just like the cases in the city, going through a process where they're selecting a member to fill a portion of the seat. And in that case, there probably would be a runoff 2-year term, because that term was just on the ballot.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to be able to appoint somebody for a full 4-year term. So that it'll be interesting.
And the people who get elected, those people who are on the ballot now, they'll probably have some influence on who gets chosen for that seat. So that puts even more emphasis on the importance of those races. And then the other incumbent who is running, that is Fiore Leone. He's been in office since 1978, since Erie County adopted its charter.
Right.
And he's in the past, he's gone unopposed at times. He's faced a certain level of competition that maybe it wasn't all that challenging, but now he has two Democratic opponents, nobody on the Republican side. Mary Rennie is one of those. She was a Erie County Library director for several years. Frida Tepfer is the other, very well known in the community. I guess what I'm interested in whenever you have a 3-person race is how does that affect the incumbent? Does Frida Tepfer pull votes away from Mary Rennie, or vice versa, and ultimately lead to Fiore Leone getting another 4 years in office? So it will be interesting to see how that plays out.
Right, and there are no Republicans on the ballot for that seat too. The other thing I want to mention on that race is, and sometimes we'll get questions about this, there were term limits imposed by ballot referendum in 2013. You get people, because Fiore and others have been in office so long, asking, well, how can they continue to run? Well, that term limit rule that came into effect in 2013 gave incumbents, people that were in office now, 2 more terms. They were basically grandfathered in there. This would be it for Fiore Leone regardless.
What about Kyle Faust? Is he in that same?
I think he is in that same position, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. And of course, there was a little bit of controversy at the start of this race between Fiore Leone and Mary Rennie, specifically because Fiore filed a petition challenge against Mary Rennie, claiming that she did not or had not lived in the city of Erie in the council district for a year, and had lived in Harbor Creek Township. But that was something that the Judge Brabender, sided with Mary Rennie. She remains on the ballot. Of course,
going to be a fascinating one to watch play out.
A guy like Fiore Leone, he's been around for a long time. He told me prior to that challenge being heard in court that he felt confident that whether or not Mary Rennie stayed on the ballot, that he would prevail and he would win. So,
and I talked to him earlier this week, and he does seem pretty confident. So we'll see what happens.
So I think one of the other interesting things with the ballot this year is that there really is a good cross section of candidates. There's more than 70 women on the ballot. You have a lot of young people that have come out to run in the county council race. Right. You have in the 7th district, you have a candidate who is William Driver, a Democrat, who is 22 years old.
22-year-old from Albion who manages a grocery store and has chosen at his age to get to that kind of level of political activity. And I talked to him a little bit this week, and he's real concerned about job training and jobs and the economic condition and climate out in that part of the West County. And interesting.
On the other side of that, on the Republican side of that, you have Clayton Schultz, a perennial candidate who's run several times. He's 90 years old. Right. So there is quite the age range there. Yeah. Even on city council, Jasmine Flores, I believe, is the youngest candidate, 25 years old. She's running. Mel Witherspoon, the incumbent, 74. So there really is a lot of diversity on the ballot. I know that that's something that I think both parties are proud of this time out. I guess the one thing that we haven't addressed is what turnout might be on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because these kinds of municipal primaries typically in Erie County haven't shown a huge turnout. I know you have some numbers on that, but I can remember, I've covered several of these going back almost 30 years. And, if there's not a presidential election involved, the turnout is typically lower, and these are kind of those off-year municipal primaries. We don't have a race for county executive. We don't have a race for mayor. So sometimes they even, depending on the weather, whether it's pouring or whether it's beautiful sunshiny day, you don't get the greatest turnout for these. So I know you did some research on the last couple primaries.
And think we had a very strong turnout last year with the congressional races. It was very strong. But now we're kind of sandwiched in between, a hotly contested congressional race and the presidential race. You got 23 Democrats already lined up to run for president. They're getting the coverage. So we'll see what happens. But
the midterm issues last year were something that pushed a lot of that too. So we had a pretty hot midterm election that's going to kind of carry some of that. Some of the results in the congressional race are going to be affected by that.
Right. If you look at 2015, 2011, 2007, those similar cycles over the last 4 years, 21%, 23%, 22%. I talked to Doug Smith, the clerk of elections, just before we came on here, and he's hoping for better. But right now, just looking at the number of absentee ballots, the Board of Elections sent out 1,000 absentee ballots so far. They've only received 500 in return. So they're hoping that number picks up, but it's still kind of disappointing of what they've seen. Jim Wirtz, too, the Democratic Party chairman, he says that he had this conversation with his Republican counterpart, Viral Salmon, the other day, that, they really both face that same challenge of, trying to elevate the importance of the municipal races, as he said, and quote, how do we continue to talk to people about why they should be voting, and how do we reach them in the downtimes after a big election cycle like we had last year. So the one point that Doug Smith makes, that Jim Wirtz makes, that Viral Salmon makes, a lot of people make, is that these races really are the important races. They're the ones that, these candidates are the ones that will decide your tax bill, if your street gets paved, if your garbage gets picked up, all those small issues that we tend to overlook.
Right.
They're, that really does speak to the importance of this election.
And I guess as somebody that's covered politics around here for a long time, I'm encouraged by the engagement in terms of some of the new faces that we're seeing.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of different people getting involved in the political process, and I don't think that can ever be a bad thing. We're also seeing third-party kind of advocacy groups lobbying for some of these candidates as much as some of them can, but canvassing, a lot of other things like that. And that's something at a local level you haven't really seen very much in Erie,
right?
At least at this level of coordination.
Right.
So it's an encouraging sign. It'll be interesting to see. I would imagine in 2020, when there's a presidential race, we're going to see a lot of that in Erie County. So I imagine when the mayor's up for re-election, when the county executive's up for re-election, we're going to see some of that. So
absolutely. Do we have any questions? No questions.
So
all right.
Let's talk a little bit about the school board races and why those are important. I know we have a lot of candidates here, but there's a lot going on, especially with the Erie School Board, and I think that's why there have been so many candidates, because they have their financial plan. LRTA is going to affect the school district as far as whether there's a new LRTA plan for tax abatement. Talk a little bit about how you think some of those races might play out and what the key issues are. I know our colleague Ed Palatel has been asking a lot of candidates about the state recovery plan and those kinds of things and where they sit on that.
Yeah, and Ed would probably be the best person to give a forecast on how those races go. But just to kind of give you a breakdown, there are, I believe, 11 candidates that are running, only 2 incumbents. So there again, you have another situation where you could have, you're going to have 3 new people on that board, and major decisions. Funding is still an issue for the Erie School District.
Absolutely.
Capital
Charters,
capital
a huge
projects,
issue for the school district right now.
And again, like you said, LRTA and how, how does the district capture some of those tax dollars? And I know we've talked, about. It's come up in the city council race that how do you deal with nonprofits and the amount of tax exempt property that they hold in the city. I know in the city council race, that's Ed Brzezinski, Tom Stashevsky have brought that up about the need to address that, because it really does put a lot on the backs of everyday city residents. So it will be an interesting race, especially with so many candidates.
Well, I think that there's some kind of cross-pollination with some of these races in terms of what the big issues are when we talk about school board and we talk about city council, for example. County council to a lesser extent, because LRTA affects the city a lot more than it would affect the county taxes. But when you see the recovery plan and when you talk about the issues like LRTA, these are issues these candidates need to know about to explain these to constituents. And what you're seeing a lot more, and we talked about the engagement and those kind of things, I think the public is expecting more out of these candidates. They're expecting them to know more about these issues these days. So you don't really get a pass on that kind of stuff.
Right.
And you really need to study up on those kinds of things.
Yeah. And that is one thing with so many fresh faces, despite what their age is.
Right.
A lot of candidates running for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I give them credit because they've had to study up on quite a few
There's a lot
very important issues. So
okay.
all right.
So that's pretty much what we have. We don't really have any questions from the public, but we're just explaining and trying to give context to the races involved in this election and what some of the issues are and what this all means to you, the citizen and the taxpayer. So,
all right. I guess the last thing we should say is go vote on Tuesday.
yeah.
Thanks for all of those who joined us and checked in on this week's Go Erie Live discussion. The video will be available for replay on the Go Erie Facebook page and on the Go Erie homepage. Thanks again to reporters Kevin Flowers and Matt Rink for helping us with this discussion and for Gannon University for sponsoring it. You can find upcoming topics and guests on the Go Erie Facebook page each week. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.